You're listening to Democracy Watch, the News Collective's weekly news report, bringing you alternative and undercover current affairs coverage from Vancouver and the Lower Mainland.
I'm Jackie Seppelt.
I'm Zachary Tharp.
I'm Violet Miles.
And I'm Ben Nelson.
It's Thursday, October 31st at 5:04 p.m. We're broadcasting from UBC Vancouver campus on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Hunkamunam-speaking Musqueam people. Unfortunately, we're missing Alex DeBoer today. She's away in Chicago, but we have a great lineup in store for you.
That's right. We sent our team of news comrades to find haunted locations all over Vancouver and the Lower Mainland. I also dug into the recent proposed changes by Councillor Pete Fry in fireworks regulations with a local business owner.
Yeah, but first, happy Halloween, everybody. I hope everyone listening has a fun costume on and has lots of candy stocked up for all the trick-or-treaters. Before we get into our main stories, we have a quick sports update from Ben Nelson.
All right, thanks, Violet. So the British Columbia Sports Hall of Fame just released their Class of 2020 list. There are many familiar Vancouver sports figures gracing the class, such as former Canucks star goalie Kirk McLean. We also have a former UBC Thunderbird and retired Major League Baseball pitcher Jeff Francis. Today I wanted to shine a light on some of the names you may not recognize. First up, we have wheelchair curler Sonia Goddett from North Vancouver. She's one of the greatest Canadian Paralympians of all time. While she started wheelchair curling at the age of 37, she rocketed through the Canadian wheelchair curling ranks. She made the Canadian Paralympic squad in 2006. 2006 also marked the first time wheelchair curling was ever in the Paralympics. Goddett helped Canada win the gold that year. She won 2 more Paralympic golds after that, one in Vancouver in front of a home crowd and one in Sochi, Russia. She's the most successful Canadian wheelchair curler ever and made the Canadian Curling Hall of Fame back in 2013. She also earned the prestigious honor of flag bearer for Canada during Sochi 2014's opening ceremony. The other athlete I want to recognize is Robin Bawa from Duncan, British Columbia. Bawa was the first player of a South Asian background to ever play in a National Hockey League match. He came up through the junior levels of Canadian hockey with the Kamloops Blazers, starring in his final season for them. This landed Bawa his first ever deal to play hockey professionally. He eventually played his first ever NHL game with the Washington Capitals. His NHL career was spread over 61 games with the Capitals, San Jose Sharks, Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, and his home province Canucks. Congrats to both of these athletes for becoming trailblazers in their sports.
Thank you, Ben. And because we're talking about Halloween and everything, I just wanted to maybe, I would say,
Pro tips,
yes, for anyone out there, for the listeners out there who are dressing up tonight. Please be cognizant of what you might be dressing up as. You know, someone else's race, culture, or identity should not be your costume. I was reading this article by David Dennis, a writer from The Guardian, who said, "Blackface represents a time when white Americans would put on dark paint on their faces and act out incredibly racist and offensive stereotypes about African Americans. The symbolism of blackface is incendiary, insensitive, and racist." And went on to say, "Without fail, every October, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter are loaded with controversial pictures of people donning blackface for Halloween costumes." And I'd also like to add that he said this way back in 2013, and 6 years later, it still feels like sometimes people are doing this. Personally, I feel that the people of Vancouver and our amazing listeners throughout Canada and abroad streaming the show on the CITR website are better than that. But if you see a friend who's wearing something questionable, please let them know. I would also like to open the floor to you guys if you have any comments on the matter of why people, seem to still be doing this in the 21st century.
Yeah, I wonder with the recent stuff with Trudeau, is it going to inspire people to try and do it in an ironic way or something?
Oh boy. It sounds like a slippery slope. I mean, fortunately, he
Yeah.
did, apologize for his actions, and I do believe he has learned from his mistake. Saying, "Do you have the clip of what he said?"
Yep. 1 second.
I shouldn't have done it. I should have known better. It was something that I didn't think was racist at the time, but now I recognize it was something racist to do, and I am deeply sorry. In 2001, when I was a teacher out in Vancouver, I attended an end-of-year gala where the theme was Arabian Nights, and I dressed up in an Aladdin costume and put makeup on. I shouldn't have done that. I should have known better, but I didn't, and I'm really sorry.
Do you think you should resign? Have done this? Would you have called for them to step down?
I think there are people who've made mistakes in this life, and you make decisions based on what they actually do, what they did, and on a case-by-case basis. I think I deeply regret that I did that. I should have known better, but I didn't.
So, yeah, that was Justin Trudeau apologizing for wearing blackface at a party here in Vancouver as a teacher, which I don't know why that was ever an idea that came through his mind, but he should have had a friend that told him to maybe not do that. So the same thing, goes for dressing up as, someone of indigenous, heritage. Please just don't do that. If, it is someone else's culture, they live with that for their whole life. You wearing as a accessory or something to look good in is just not a good idea. So anyway, up next is another spooky segment in today's show about the old spaghetti factory here in Vancouver. But first, here are some words from our sponsors.
Unfortunately, we're having some technical difficulty with the ads, so we'll proceed directly to the piece about the old spaghetti factory. Enjoy.
Thank you for tuning in to CITR 101.9 FM. My name is Adeline Ping, and this Halloween, I'll be focusing on the stories of ghosts supposedly in residence at the old spaghetti factory in Gastown. Opened in 1970, this Gastown location was the site of the first old spaghetti factory restaurant in Canada. Yesterday, I visited the restaurant in an effort to learn more about the various paranormal activities that have been observed there. I asked a server whether she had personally seen or heard of any of the apparitions. She replied that at the back of the restaurant, there is supposedly the ghost of a little boy who sometimes changes the place settings of the cutlery on the tables. At times, she had personally seen the cutlery strewn in different locations on the tables, and upon asking the other staff, they replied that they hadn't moved anything since they had been in the back of the restaurant. According to a psychic who visited the restaurant, the boy's name is Edward. He has been active after closing hours on various occasions. Servers have observed him running towards the back in the empty restaurant late at night. When they followed him, he would run under a table and would disappear by the time they brought the manager over. The psychic also noted that there's a vortex at the back of the restaurant. This is a doorway to other dimensions that allows spirits to cross over into the human world. Another spirit that frequents the restaurant is the ghost of a tram conductor. He is said to live in the restaurant's signature trolley car with its dining tables. This tram car was built in the 1900s, was a part of the public transit system, and finally became a part of the old spaghetti factory here in Gastown in 1969. Since the building is not connected with the former BC Electric Railway Co., the ghost probably came as a part of the trolley car. Staff have reported seeing the conductor's ghost in uniform, sitting at the same table in the trolley car after closing hours. There have been some unexplainable cold spots reported in the car, as well as place settings that have been inexplicably moved. Finally, I asked my server about her personal beliefs regarding spirits. Even though she believes that the energy is present, since her father has had paranormal experiences, she doesn't believe that we should try to tempt spirits, conjure them, or try to capture them by taking pictures, for instance. She also believes that since energy can't be destroyed, the presence may linger there, but we should do our best to just let them be. Thanks for listening. This piece was reported and produced by Adeline Payne. Special thanks to the Old Spaghetti Factory, the Ghosts of Vancouver website, and CITR 101.9 FM.
So if you're just tuning in, you're listening to CITR 101.9's News Collective show, Democracy Now! It's our special spooky Halloween edition of the show, and that was a piece about the spaghetti factory, or the old spaghetti factory in Gastown, commonly known as the Spag around some people. That's apparently haunted, which is a crazy story. But anyway, I digress. Violet also found a crazy ghost story, or helped with it this week.
Yeah, so this was actually sought out by Milena Carrasco. She sat down with Deborah Sloan, who had a truly spooky ghost story to tell. Certainly fitting of our Halloween episode this week. And we're about to play it, but just for the listeners at home, I mean, you'll get a little bit of context about this, but to add to the spookiness, Deborah actually has a pet crow, which you will be certainly hearing throughout this piece. So just be warned to all our listeners.
Yeah, there's crows, there's monks. It's like super spooky.
It's the spookiest of them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so take a listen.
Your name or
Sure.
anything?
I'm Deborah Sloan. I'm a ceramic artist. Should I say I'm Jasper's mother?
Sure.
And I'm Jasper Sloan Yip's mom. It's the prime social.
This is great for like the
Yeah, if we
the
could only
audio.
if we could only get him to caw at the right moment, just spooky.
Oh my god. Wow. So it just fell from a tree and
Yeah, when he was about 6 weeks or 4 weeks old, and they run around the ground, and many of them, we don't know how old he was. He was about this big, and some of them will forage off the ground and then fly slowly upward. But his wing had been really badly damaged. Something had attacked him on his wing, maybe even his fellow nestmates, and he broke it in 2 places. There's no repair, right? So my husband, I was going to let him die. That's what they normally do. They just quietly die under the leaves. And but my husband picked him up. I said, "Don't pick him up. Don't pick him up." Because my husband thought, well, maybe I'll just put him out of his misery, because he'd been there about 3 days. Oh, Brad! And he had been cawing like that, for days, and we were ignoring it. Because you're supposed to. Anyways, you picked him up. So once you pick him up, you either put him down, you either kill him, or you look after them. So we ended up in an IKEA laundry basket for a number of months. And then we had a big cage built there. We had a cage. It's a pity he couldn't, we were really hoping he would just be able to fly a bit.
A little bit.
Like just fly into the trees. We'd for him and he'd have a backyard life. But he can't even do that.
Really?
He can't fly higher than that. He goes, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So it's kind of sad, he keeps trying. So we can't put him anywhere high because he hurts himself when he lands.
Oh.
I know, and they could live up to 50 years.
Whoa. And he tries. Still tries to
Oh, he can't stop himself. He cannot stop that impulse.
Of course, that's his
That's right.
purpose.
That's right. Anyways, there you are.
Yeah, thanks for telling me that little crow story. I mean, it's good as a background just in case people are hearing the cause. And
Yeah.
So why is that crow so close?
That's right. Right over our shoulder. And then with parties, he's cawing away. He loves parties. He likes being in a crowd.
Really?
And he's very happy with his 4 or 5 people sitting around. He really likes it.
Well.
Now, the ghost story.
Yeah.
Well, so let me say, long, long, long ago and far, far away in the district of Burnaby, I was just starting out teaching ceramic sculpture at the Shadbolt Centre. It had been the Burnaby Arts Centre. Before that, it had been a home. It had been some kind of home for some kind of spiritual cult, and before that, it had been a monastery. And I was built in the late 1880s, I believe, as a family home, sort of like a farm or a home. So that old Shadbolt Centre is quite old. It's quite historic. And then there's the Burnaby Village right next door, as you probably know. So I was just starting to teach, and they have technicians, and they were taking me through the rooms and showing me where everything was. And when we went there was a blocked-off stairwell, which was a spiral stairwell. And when we went into that, this is where all the clay was stored. And the technician said, now, we know there's a ghost in the house. And it's a little girl, and she's usually near this stairwell or in the stairwell. But this is usually where she's been seen. And I went, oh, really? And this is 1991. So I continued to teach for the next 23 or so years, the same course, the ceramic sculpture. And always in the back of my mind, and I taught from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night. And usually the place was empty by the time I was cleaning up and leaving. The students would be leaving, and there might be cleaners would come along, and they would sort of say hi and drift through the rooms and do all their stuff. And we all knew each other quite well. And but this one night, this is for years, I looked for this little ghost. I was always thought how extraordinary it really would be to experience something that none of us really actually think we believe in. So it was late it was around 2011, or 2012, and I'd been teaching there for now almost 20 years, and never had seen the ghost, not a peep. And it was one of my last classes. And we were late. I had a bunch of rugby wives in this particular class, all these lovely women, and they were running late. And finally there was only one left, and she decided to head off to the washroom just before she left for her car. So it was now around 10:30 at night, and I was just cleaning up the room. And she came back into the room and said, "Who's that little girl? Where's she from?" And I didn't say anything to her. I just said, "Oh, you saw a little girl?" She says, "Yes, she was all dressed in white." And I said, I was just kind of gobsmacked, because I knew that had to be the ghost. So I went back to the bathroom to see if I saw her, but I didn't. So that's the closest I ever got. And the rugby wife left for her car, and I never said anything to her. And I just sort of sat down and thought, oh, the ghost, she turned up. And then I only taught 1 or 2 more classes. But that was my one and only sighting. But it really, I'd never mentioned it to anyone. And I knew that she was a little girl dressed in white. And so it really felt genuine. And then, of course, it shifts all your perceptions. Because, of course, if you don't believe in ghosts, I mean, if you don't believe in an afterlife, and if you don't believe in spirits wandering around the world, then you're forced to actually think that it's a possibility that something's cruising around. Because how could this have happened? You know? So there it was. That was my ghost sighting.
Wow.
Good timing, Brad. Yeah.
And do you know why she was there? Did she die in the house?
Yes, apparently she had died. She had died as a young girl, which they often did, you know, before antibiotics and everything. Child death rates were very high until antibiotics turned out. I mean, if there wasn't consumption, there was infections and high fevers. People died of high fevers. There was no protection against stuff like that. I know that my Japanese sister-in-law said that in her tradition, you didn't really own your child until they were well past 5 years old. You couldn't really believe they were yours because they may well not make it to 5. Yeah, in the old days. Now, of course, it's a shock if anything happens. But yes, the little girl had died. There you go.
Well, thank you so much for telling me that piece.
You're welcome. You can do all the fact checking and find out it's all wrong, except that woman did see a ghost.
Exactly.
She did see it. It wasn't prompted.
Yeah. That's awesome. I feel like I should say bye to Brad too.
Oh, absolutely.
He's been such a big part of this conversation. Okay, I'm gonna walk over here.
Yeah, and he'll probably call.
Okay. Bye, Brad. Thank you.
Oh, he's going to be mute.
Oh, he's looking over here. Ooh. Oh, he came.
Yeah. And now he'll try and peck you.
Oh, will he?
Oh, yeah. You put your hand here. Oh, there you
go. Interview by myself, Milena Carrasco. Edited by Violet Miles, produced by Arman Reina, and the songs you heard were Window Demons by Rolljoy and They Might Not by Petal of Infinity. Thanks for listening to Deborah, Brad, and I, and have a spooky Halloween.
So that was definitely a very spooky story with a very spooky and ominous crow in the background. That was great. Question, do you guys believe in ghosts?
I heard this thing recently that was I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe people who say they've seen ghosts. And I feel like that resonates with me. I'm I believe that you saw what you saw, you know?
Interesting. I definitely believe that there's maybe not specific ghosts, but specific things. This is going to sound really weird about my character, and I'm saying this on live radio, but
it's going to be used against you in 20 years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When you're a witness for a top case.
Apparently, something that ghosts or spirits do is move around small change because it's easy for them to move really light things. And ever since my grandmother passed away, I've been finding change everywhere, which is very weird. And I know there's kind of that red Jeep effect where it's if you know something or if you're looking for something, you're going to see it everywhere. But I don't know, that specific thing. And I never find change. And all of a sudden, in the past couple months, I found a good almost $3 in small change.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's cool because it's something that you can't prove and you also can't disprove. So
exactly,
we'll be stuck in it forever until we die, and then we find out.
Right? So spooky. Anyway, in other news pertaining to Vancouver and Halloween, what's this about all the fireworks going on?
Yeah, so while the city of Vancouver is considering banning the sale of retail fireworks. So just for context, legally, you need a permit to buy fireworks, and even with a permit, you can only purchase the fireworks the week before Halloween. However, these fireworks can only be used the night of Halloween. Alternatively, you can obtain a special events permit and buy fireworks for the event throughout the year. In this case, you need to obtain permission from a safe public venue for the fireworks and generally not a place of residence. From what I understand, Councillor Preet Fry's motion would prohibit the sale of fireworks even the week before Halloween, but the special events permits would still be allowed. As someone who grew up outside Vancouver using fireworks every Diwali, I was curious about the impact of the current and future regulations would be on the fireworks industry and how they actually operate in practice. And so I spoke to Mani, a local business owner of M&M Fireworks Factory, about this. Let's take a listen.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Absolutely.
Mani. Yeah. So to start off, could you briefly describe M&M Fireworks Factory's business, like what it does, what it sells, how it makes money?
So what we do is we supply retail. It's a retail stores. We supply fireworks, all sorts, from sparklers to amazing entertainment shows, similar to what you see in the Symphony of Fire. Obviously, we get it from a distributor who sells it at a reasonable price, and then we're able to mark it up to a certain amount and still have enough wiggle room to give discounts because, of course, we want everybody to enjoy and have fun. And so there's always good profit margin at the end of the day.
So how would your business be impacted by this motion to ban the sale of retail fireworks?
Because the biggest amount of sales occur in the 25th to the 31st. People actually pre-buy for for example, for Indian festival of lights called Diwali or Chinese New Year, Christmas, New Year's Eve, and also some people who know that they're planning birthdays or whatever event. So they make sure they purchase enough stock during this week because retail stores allow the purchaser to be able to see all the products and also gain the product knowledge that we're able to give them with our experience in the industry. And we have been in this industry about 17 years now. So it's much easier for people to purchase at that in a retail store. So that's how it's going to impact us is it's going to severely, not only just the profits that we make during the week, but it's also supplying that demand that's out there because fireworks is such, it's really, really fun. It's all about being knowledgeable about the practice of discharging, being able to clean it up and just being smart and the safety concerns.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit. I just want on this point of how it's working. So if in the future this was banned, those people for the Chinese New Year, they would, and even today, technically, they would need to have a special event permit to launch those fireworks on Chinese New Year or Diwali or New Year's Eve. Is that correct? Today, as the regulations stand today.
So the special events permit, remember, you cannot just get it for your residence. So you can't just say, I'm going to just discharge it in my own house on Chinese New Year. They won't allow that. The special events permits have to be in designated areas. For example, Chinese temples, Indian temples, venues for weddings, special venues. And not all venues allow it. So that's what you have to get a special events permit for. Like you and I as an individual can't just apply to the city for a special event just for the mere fact of doing it at your home.
So just so I understand correctly, the people who are buying it like ahead of time for the Chinese New Year, for New Year's Eve, for Diwali in this window, how are they intending to use the product?
See, that they're basically taking their own liability at that point. They understand that they're not going to get a special events permit for residents, so they basically take their own chances of lighting it up wherever they choose to do so, and hope for the best that their neighbors don't, complain or police doesn't show up and blah, blah, blah. So that's on them, to be very honest. We try to let them know that, we try to educate them that, it's probably better if you do this, but at the end of the day, that's out of our control. In practice, majority don't. You'll always have the ones that actually do, and those ones are much better. Like for example, wedding venues and birthday parties, because they end up purchasing a lot, and they're all able to do a beautiful display for their people there, the guests.
Yeah. Okay. So in the motion, it states it raises a lot of concerns about the use of fireworks, and it raises concerns about impacts on people with PTSD and all sorts of things, and animals. But I want to highlight one in particular, given that we are in a climate emergency. It states that fireworks have environmental impacts through the release of poisonous chemicals and airborne particles, including colorants, propellants, like copper, strontium, lithium, barium, aluminium, potassium, and percolates. Research has found that fireworks-sourced airborne particulates have been found to deplete lung defenses more than pollution from traffic sources. Spent firework particles and other objects make their way into waterways, our atmosphere, and our environment. So, what do you think M&M Fireworks Factory can do or should be doing to be combating climate change and being a responsible steward of the environment?
Well, once again, all these products, like all the stuff that you've named that is supposedly in the product, these are all tested by the Canadian government before they're allowed to be even sold. They're tested for all that, plus the amount of gunpowder that goes in there. There's always a max load that you're allowed in a product. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we do educate everybody in regards to when they discharge it, make sure it's in open areas, not close to homes, not close to businesses, make sure that there's a vicinity that you should be staying away from the product as well for your own endangerment, plus those of other people. And also that's the consumption of the smoke and all the other elements that are in the product. Even on the product alone, it clearly identifies the distance you should be staying away from the product. So we do promote that heavily because the last thing we want is anybody getting hurt or even any future problems, for example, respiratory problems and that. So we do make sure we educate people like that. I mean, we try the best we can. Ultimately, it comes down to that individual. And of course, the products have to be purchased 19 and over with a valid ID. And usually the adults really do, well, if they're doing it for their kids, then they're promoting it to their kids where the safety concerns are and where it lies and what we're telling them about the distance and all that stuff. So that's how we just promote it. We're not very aware as for the medical aspect of things, that how this does really impact the internal. I mean, me personally, I've been doing fireworks my whole entire life. I'm a 40-year-old individual. I have no, knock on wood, no lung issues, no respiratory issues. So I have no issues, and we've been doing it forever.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to, we talked about the climate. I also want to raise, other concerns about, animals, how they get stressed by these fireworks, both wild and domestic animals, how people with PTSD can get negatively impacted by this. And the city, I think the Vancouver Police Department said that fireworks-related complaints cost the city $400,000 during this time period. Last year. And so I was just wondering if I put it to you that if somebody has the perspective based on all this data that maybe fireworks don't belong in a residential kind of environment and maybe belong more in for professional displays, and only in those cases should the fireworks be allowed. What is your perspective on that?
I feel that those costs that the city does incur, I mean, I do understand it. I do see it around. I don't know the dollar value, how it gets to that much, but it's just that what happens is not our stores, but other competitors, frankly, they don't care who they're selling to. They sell to kids of all ages, which is unbelievable that they do, and also unbelievable that the parents of those children are allowing them to go out and buy and also promote them and, put them off and light them off. And those are the kids. See, it's usually the kids that are the ones that, frankly, have no care of what they're doing. They're the ones that they do it anywhere. They cause damages to businesses, to possibly homes, maybe parks, or whatever the case may be. That ends up being where the city starts getting more police force out there, trying to get to them and trying to seize products and stop this from happening. And those same children. And not even children, even young adults, teenagers even, I'm saying, all the way up to 18, 19, they frankly do it every single day, and they don't care that that the law states that it only can be done on the 31st. They're doing it all the time, and that's what's causing more of these costs. And, of course, as a business owner, we're trying to promote them to follow the rules and regulations and the laws, and so that it would hence stop all these additional costs, because ultimately us taxpayers are the ones paying that. We're paying the police salaries and all that, but that kind of ends up being beyond our control. I feel a level of education would be better promoted rather than just from our retail stores, which we try our best. I believe that it should be from the fire department and or maybe the Canadian National Fireworks Association doing more speaking events, even on television, going on news at the times of the season, and really educating the public and the adults in regards to all of this, and making sure that everybody tries their best to follow the guidelines. I think that should be given. See, as you can see, it's never on the news. It's never promoted on radios, saying, hey, there's safety, hey, there's laws, make sure you have your permits, make sure you do this, make sure you stand this much away. That should be more out there.
We're back. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. You're listening to CITR 101.9 FM. And yeah, you just heard a piece that I did, which was an interview with a small business owner in Vancouver who sells fireworks. And it's interesting because, I think a lot of people don't even buy from people who are, have a license to sell fireworks. And so that whole transaction is illegal. But he actually has a license to sell fireworks. And he was talking about his perspective on the fireworks regulations and how they'll impact his business, and his response to criticisms and concerns about the environment, about animals, about its effects on people with PTSD and those kind of issues. We're going to kind of switch gears here, kind of staying in touch with our Halloween theme. We have a headline about a Vancouver cemetery.
Yeah, thanks. So, not much of a headline because it's not the most pertinent or timely story, but it's a bit interesting. It's about Mountain View Cemetery, which is the only cemetery in Vancouver. It's located on Fraser Street, just kind of off of 30th in that kind of area. So this, basically in 2003, there was a bylaw created called the Mountain View Cemetery Bylaw, and it was recently amended this past July. And there are a couple changes that are important that were made in this amendment. First, they wanted to create a specific cemetery committee within the city council. Second, they'd like to adjust some of the cemetery fees, so basically like the fees that you'd have to pay to buy a plot of land, basically based on a market comparison. And they want to implement some new products and services for purchase. They didn't specify what these new products or services were, but I can only assume it has something to do with something I'm going to speak about in a couple minutes. Couple other things. Mountain View Cemetery is the only green space in Vancouver that still doesn't restrict smoking, which is kind of odd. So they're hoping to change this law to align it with the rest of the green spaces in the city. One kind of comical thing, well, not comical, a little bit sad. The cemetery currently has a major dog issue. Although in the bylaw that was created in 2003, dogs weren't allowed to be off-leash, people still do it all the time. I'm not in there super frequently, but the times that I have been in there, there's often dogs that are off-leash. And these dogs and their owners have apparently been leaving excrements in sacred areas, urinating on gravestones and floral arrangements, and interrupting funeral services. The staff of the cemetery don't want to outright ban dogs. However, they would like stricter regulations of these laws. Dogs should not be allowed off-leash in the cemetery, and because majority of the grass in the majority of the grass area of the cemetery is in fact a person's grave, dogs should only be walked on paved pathways. The staff also promises to enact an educational and awareness plan for dog owners. And finally, and the most interesting amendment and most Halloween pertinent, is the changes to what is called the Green and Sustainable Internment Options part of the bylaw. So Mountain View Cemetery is apparently one of the only in Canada that allows families to reuse a grave space more than once or twice, which is a really weird way to phrase that, but that's actually what's written in the bylaw. It's just once or twice. So essentially, meaning that, say, if you have a family member who passes away, in other cemeteries, you would need to buy multiple plots of land if you wanted to bury them together, in the same area. But at Mountain View Cemetery, you can buy one plot of land and essentially bury as many family members as you'd like in it. This is part of the transition into sustainable burial practices. What exactly does that mean? It's really not as bad as you're probably thinking. Green burial practices essentially require the remains to be wrapped and placed in a biodegradable cloth or vault, to refrain from using chemical embalming fluids to preserve the body, and to plant native plants at the gravesite opposed to a commemorative plaque or a gravestone. So, not that spooky. Where it actually gets kind of a little bit spooky and weird is the changes they're making to laws surrounding sharing grave plots. Mountain View Cemetery is currently running out of space. 150,000 remains take up a lot of room. Currently, the law states that you have the right to be buried by yourself forever, and that law isn't going to change. However, in the future, this amendment is hoping to create the possibility of buying partial rights for burial space. Essentially, what this means is you can buy part of a plot, have a loved one buried in it, and then several years down the line, possibly have someone else buy into the same plot and be buried there as well. This process sometimes involves temporarily removing the remains from the grave to dig deeper and then returning the remains later. This practice can happen between family members now, but the changes they would like to make, like I said, would allow someone who isn't a relative to buy into the same plot. So you could essentially have your loved one's remains like unearthed and then someone else put on top of them, which is a little spooky in my opinion. I don't know what you guys think of it, but there's something a little bit eerie about a dead body, even if it's decomposed, but like being unearthed. I don't know about that.
It just seems the logistics of that whole process seem very crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to freeze myself. Problem solved.
Freeze.
You could do what Walt Disney did.
So we can just go around and like, what is everybody's plans for the afterlife? So Zach's gonna be frozen. Like, what are you gonna do, Jackie?
I'd probably like to do the tree method, which I guess is similar to what they're suggesting. Like, basically, you get a biodegradable urn and then like plant a tree on top of you, so then you kind of grow with the tree. What about you, Violet?
I haven't given it like so much thought,
Right.
but I definitely don't want to be like rotting away in a coffin. It just seems like unnecessary. I actually hadn't heard of the tree thing before you mentioned it at the last meeting, but that sounds really nice. I always thought like cremated, like maybe throw my ashes somewhere.
You turn into a diamond also.
Whoa.
I don't know if I need that.
Yeah, Zach just said.
So I just said you can turn yourself into a diamond also. I don't know how expensive that is, but you can theoretically, since, diamonds are just crystallized carbon and your body is made up of carbon and, whatever, once it's, cremated, you can just have it put under extreme pressure and then eventually you'll be crystallized into a diamond. I don't know how many people would want to buy that, but maybe if you want to turn into a charm or something.
Yeah, for a loved one or something.
Yeah.
What about you, Ben?
I haven't given it much thought. I'm 17. I don't know. I guess whatever is the least hassle to everyone around me. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I would go for cremation. That's I think, typical thing to do in my case, and seems pretty cheap.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting because I know there's a lot of religions that don't let you get cremated, but there are some of them, like Catholicism, that are actually changing their, religious laws. I don't think that's the right word, but like basically saying that, no, you're allowed to be, stance on it. You're allowed to be cremated because of this like overwhelming lack of space that's happening.
Yeah.
That these religious institutions are like, okay, no, this is okay now. Like, we'll bless this.
Because it's just so expensive, right? Like the real estate. Anyway, so from that interesting digression, lastly, as many of you have heard, TransLink workers are possibly going to be on strike if they and TransLink cannot reach an agreement tonight. And the question that many of us are thinking is, what are we going to do if there are severe reduced public transport system options for us?
Yes, Arman. It's kind of a scary time. I'm not going to lie. I just got a new apartment, and I'm relying on the buses now that I've fully moved to Vancouver. And it would really not be too good if I could not get there on the first day I can live there. But, it's looking like it's going to be like a partial shutdown, kind of like ease out of riding and everything. Fortunately, I don't think it's going to be right this second that, talks are not looking too good. But, with 50,000 people riding the 99B line every day, having that line just stop would not be a good thing to happen. And maybe, if you live close enough to work, bike just in case. Maybe dust off that bike after bike to work week, last week. So maybe dust that off and get ready for that. Or, maybe carpooling or something if you have a few coworkers, I guess, that live near you. But yeah, hopefully everything will be cleared up soon. Jackie,
you mentioned earlier that the parameters of the strike are limited to people not wearing their uniform. Could you just expand a bit more about what the implications of the current measures they're taking are from what you've read?
Yeah, so from what I looked at this morning, just as a curious student, it seems like they're going to roll out the strike gradually if changes aren't made. Right now, it looks like starting, I guess, tonight at midnight, there's a uniform ban, so bus drivers won't be wearing, or I guess transit operators won't be wearing their uniforms. And then there's also I guess not ban, but maintenance workers directly related to TransLink services won't be working overtime anymore. I'm not super familiar with what the implications of that will have.
But it doesn't sound like it's going to be like 99B line shut down tomorrow, right?
No,
which is what a lot of the,
I think we're all going to be
able
to get home safe from our Halloween events tonight and this weekend. We'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. I think everyone is really hoping that doesn't happen.
And they come to an agreement. And I was listening into some of the reasons why they're striking, and I think one of the things that came up was I think a lot of the safety issues around how the transit workers are getting, intimidated and attacked by some unusual, passengers. So that's really upsetting to hear.
You heard about the instance in Burnaby? I want to say it was today or yesterday, where someone he couldn't. I think he had to get off the bus. I don't know exactly the whole situation, but apparently he was kicking the door.
I think that I saw that video online. Yep. It was very kind of violent, and it's. Yeah, and I think the other
really scary.
And I think the other issues is I think they
haven't been contracted since March.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there's a number of issues, and I also use the bus every day, multiple times a day. Bus drivers are some of the hardest working people in this city. I have so much respect. That job is difficult, and I think even if the buses and the services are slowed down and less frequent, I think we need to remember that we should be angry at the city of Vancouver, or maybe this is my personal opinion, but coming in here, but I'm angry at the city of Vancouver for perhaps not treating these hard workers as much as, or with the respect that they deserve and the contracts that they deserve and so forth, rather than getting angry at the bus drivers necessarily.
Oh
yeah. And on that point, I think one of the other things they mentioned was that bathroom breaks, they were given 3-minute bathroom breaks. That's ridiculous.
It's crazy.
And then they have to go in these porta potties.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can do a lot better as a city in terms of how the bus drivers are treated. And also in terms of wages, I think they believe that they are getting paid less than the average in Canada. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I think that's a statistic that they've put out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for a transit system that's so well used by Vancouver, I know in other cities, the transit system just isn't used, or it's used by certain populations more so than others. But I think everyone can agree that everybody takes the bus at least once a month, no matter your socioeconomic status or your race or other things. And the fact that it's so well used and so well relied on by most people, the even idea of the fact that like we might not have buses just shocks me.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, on that happy, or not so happy note, I think that brings us to an end of our show for today.
Yeah, this was our spooky yet informative Halloween broadcast of Democracy Watch. I hope you guys enjoyed the show.
Yeah, if you're not too intoxicated with the amount of candy you've consumed from trick-or-treating. And yeah, tune in again next Thursday at 5 p.m. for more Democracy Watch on CITR 101.9 FM. Have a great night and stay tuned for more CITR programming.
Happy holidays.